man, where do we keep going with this stuff? I thought we had a ridiculous idea that was brought upon us on the previous video, but no, we have ourselves some more. Because now we have ourselves it's a second Patrick Kane to the Buffalo Sabres trade idea that has been blasted out there into the media and that I've been seeing people talk about on Twitter, talk about on other social media outlets. That is just so... man. Let's go over some history here now, shall we? We've made Patrick Kane trade videos on a few ideas here already. The first one was a few months ago. And that was indeed a Patrick Kane to the Buffalo Sabres video topic back then. It was a trade idea that saw Patrick Kane being involved with a Sam Reinhart or a Casey Mittelstadt, and eventually, adding some other stuff on there, picks, prospects, whatever, and seeing if that could go through. And that video spoke about how it's absolutely ridiculous. Well, we have an even more ridiculous one that involves the same guys, plus one. Let's go over onto this article over here. It was published on thehockeywriters.com, and it was published a few days ago. I am leaving some time on the table talking about this today on Saturday, November 15th, but it's mostly because I wanted to let this topic marinate a little bit before we came in with our take. The title of the article here is "A Patrick Kane Trade to the Sabres Makes Sense for All Parties Involved." Hear me out, in parentheses, the writer says. Now, the article opens up with all the same stuff that we know about Patrick Kane. One of the best players in the league, one of the best players we have seen ever play the game. He's an expensive contract, but he's kind of worth it because of what he is able to do out there on the ice, his abilities, all that stuff, etc. He's got a no-move clause, but he's in a position where his team, the Chicago Blackhawks, they are rebuilding, and they were very public about saying they're rebuilding, which is why the idea of a Patrick Kane trade idea, should he be interested in winning a Stanley Cup somewhere else before the deal is done and his hockey career is sealed shut, it may be possible. And that's all that is, first and foremost. It's a may-be possible situation. But the Buffalo Sabres are indeed Patrick Kane's hometown team, which is why Buffalo is always getting pulled into these discussions. And then the article goes over the whole, okay, the Blackhawks could use young assets, etc., etc., etc. The Sabres are trying to stack up. Who knows if they can continue to do that, which is why, they ended up getting Taylor Hall, Eric Stahl. We kind of know the story. It's been said a boatload of times over on this YouTube channel, on other YouTube channels, on TV, on the radio, etc. So, yeah. Getting past that, the article then goes over whether or not the dollars make sense, whether or not it would actually be financially possible for a Patrick Kane trade to go over to the Sabres and actually make sense. If both teams came to terms regarding the players involved, the financial aspect wouldn't be as cut and dry. For Chicago, yada yada yada, $10.5 million, the Blackhawks would have to retain a portion of Kane's salary, most likely, which is what the conclusion here in this article comes to. The fact is, the Blackhawks do indeed have the capacity to retain some salary, which is what makes this discussion a little bit more easier to digest, which is why, if you go over to the end of the article, or at least before the end, this is the actual trade idea that is put out there into the universe. To even begin this type of negotiation, Buffalo would need to be prepared to part ways with potentially rising talent. That includes any or all of Rasmus Dahlin, Sam Reinhart, and Casey Mittelstadt. Players who would ultimately set up the Blackhawks for a better fate in the years ahead, while the Sabres enjoy more immediate results. That is our offer here. Dahlin, Reinhart, and Mittelstadt. Now, I said this about the previous offer we had, where we just had Reinhart and Mittelstadt for Kane. But that was an offer that the Chicago Blackhawks would not accept. Because, hey, Patrick Kane's value to the Hawks is so incredibly huge that getting two guys, one of whom is a very nice top-line winger who can also play center too in Sam Reinhart, while the other has not performed up to expectations at the NHL level in Casey Mittelstadt, this is not an idea you say yes to if you're Chicago. What you're giving up in Patrick Kane is one of the best players this decade of hockey has ever seen. So you need to be able to get value back that is undisputably At the very least, an overpayment. And you can say, okay, the long-term future of a Sam Reinhart and a Casey Mittelstadt, you could debate something, whether or not that long-term value is an accurate reflection of Patrick Kane's value in the now. But nah, screw that, man. When you're talking about the best players in the league, the guys who can get a point per game in their sleep, the guys who could probably suit up for 100+ points every year if everything goes right, you don't take a look at it with the potential of the future in mind. You say, okay, give us the most guaranteed value in the future you can have. Because I don't care what happens with Sam Reinhart or Casey Mittelstadt. The fact is, these guys are not guaranteed to go into the long-term future with the same upward trajectories that would balance out a Patrick Kane's value today. Which is why we said even with the draft picks in the previous video, it would be a Chicago no. But for this one over here, Rasmus Dahlin. Dahlin's a guy who had 40-something points in the NHL as an 18-year-old. Dahlin is the guy who many people believe is going to be the #1 defenseman of this league into the next 15 years worth of gameplay. Dahlin is the guy who many people believe will probably walk away with more Norrises than Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Mira Heiskanen. He is the leader of that pack when it comes to the big four young up-and-coming defensemen who have already broken into the league with such force that they will be great sooner, later, and the entire time frame that exists in between. Rasmus Dahlin putting on this trade offer makes a lot more sense in my mind. But if you're the Buffalo Sabres, why in your right mind would you trade away Rasmus Dahlin? This guy is good today. And this guy is going to be even better tomorrow. Even better in 2 years. Probably the best defender in the league by the time 3 or 4 years rolls around. And there's no sugarcoating it with Rasmus Dahlin because everybody kind of knows how good this guy is already, how projectable his game is into the long-term future, how smart he is, how skilled he is, how effective he is at both ends of the ice. This is the kind of player whom if the Buffalo Sabres wanted to win now with, they could totally do that. If you trade away Reinhart and Casey Mittelstadt for Patrick Kane, what you're doing to your on-ice roster is essentially Reinhart for Kane. Because Casey Mittelstadt was playing in the AHL, he's not in that lineup, at least from last year, if we're talking about that. It is a clear net gain for the Sabres. Reinhart for Kane, the rest of your lineup stays the same. My gosh, you guys got immensely better. But if it's Dahlin and Reinhart being swapped out for Kane instead, then you could make the debate that this team may have even gotten worse. Because even if you do add on the Eric Stahls and the Taylor Halls and you add the Patrick Kanes, a first line of, my gosh, Taylor Hall, Jack Eichel, and Patrick Kane with Eric Stahl in your second line with Jeff Skinner, my gosh, that sounds so good. You're getting rid of Rasmus Dahlin. That's big. That is very big. That is one of your best defenders, if not an already established top 2 defender in the league at 19, 20 years old already. If you're getting rid of that, I don't know if I can guarantee an actually progressively moving forward Buffalo Sabres team for 2020, 2021 compared to before, even with the other acquisitions. As for Chicago, though, of course, if you're offering Rasmus Dahlin, Reinhart, and Mittelstadt for Patrick Kane, I think it's a very likely process that Stan Bowman goes and calls Patrick Kane and says, hey man, you want to wait for Buffalo? We got a really good trade offer, we want to go with it. So, I don't know. At the end of the day, this Kane stuff, it's not going to happen. We know Patrick Kane is not going to get traded, but the idea did present itself in the article, which is why I wanted to talk about it here today. I saw so many Sabres fans just so ticked off about this proposal because why would you trade away Dahlin? There's like nothing in the league that you could get back for Dahlin that I think would actually be worth it. Even Connor McDavid. Sure, McDavid is the best player in the league, but Rasmus Dahlin and what he can be, what he already is, what he is supposed to be for this league, that's not something you depart with easily. So, yeah, that's my opinion on it. Talk to me in the comments what you think about this weird trade idea. Is it as ridiculous as I'm talking about it over here? Obviously, Chicago would say yes to this, but Buffalo would be out of their minds to make a trade offer like this. And that's kind of what it comes down to, because if you're trading away a Patrick Kane, the offer has to be so up and away good to the point that you have no choice but to accept it, that I don't think there's any way a deal gets done otherwise. There are different circumstances, like, Erik Karlsson was kind of traded away from the Senators because he was on an expiring deal, which is why the Senators did not get as much of a haul for him. But Kane's locked up for a while, man. You have time with this guy. So there's a completely different discussion there, which is why this idea is so whack to me. But talk to me in the comments if you enjoyed this video. That's 9. And bye.